we are with something you were not expecting, but I do like to try and deliver surprises every now and then for you guys. And here we are with the best mixtapes of the 2010s, in my opinion, what I think were the best mixtapes of the 2010s, because the 2010s were pretty important for mixtapes. I think it really catapulted so many artists into the limelight, and they really do help craft careers in a lot of ways. It's a starting point for many artists who then go on to become something so much bigger, but even without that, it's sometimes the artist's best work, and trying to achieve something on the level of their mixtape era is sometimes pretty difficult. And with the internet being such a significant part of music in the 2010s, giving artists a new light that was never there before, shining a light on artists that were so obscure that you could never have had these existing in the 90s or the 80s, it seemed to make sense to do a video like this, talking about the best mixtapes of the 2010s, because it really was the mixtape era. Don't get me wrong, the 2000s were significant as well, but the 2010s just hit different with mixtapes, and I think many classics came out in the 2010s, and even some that are so significant that I don't exactly love all that much. I mean, you've got a mixtape like Acid Rap, for example, by Chance the Rapper. Never was that big on it, so it's not going to be on this list, so that's a bit of a spoiler for you there. But it's still goddamn significant. I could not deny the significance and perhaps even the importance of what Chance the Rapper was doing on that mixtape for Chicago rap. But anyway, let's get into the list. This is only my opinion, of course, my 20 favourite mixtapes, and I do have a few guests to help me along the way talk about each mixtape. Not every mixtape, but you'll see some friendly faces pop up. Okay, starting at number 20, here we go.
The paradox of young Nudy is that he makes music that is really darkly menacing and gritty, while simultaneously being very buoyant and colorful, and nowhere is this better exemplified than on his first Slimeball tape. While this is definitely aided by the Pierre Bourne-led production, whose synth choices across this tape are some of the most richly textured I've heard, on a Trap Project, the songs Sweep, Butt Naked Bitches, Rough Life, and Spaced Out being prime examples, it's actually young Nudy himself who showcases the biggest dichotomy on this project. There's a dry, cold, cutthroat element to his voice that makes him sound as evil as the Chucky doll on the cover, but he also has a more squawky, warbly vocal tone on top of it that gives him a more eccentric edge, and when you pair that with the really bouncy flows that he weaves throughout each track, the end result is a tape that is both as twisted and vibrantly creative as any nightmare that Freddy Krueger could come up with.
At number 19, we have Thugger, who may appear a few more times in this list. But the first appearance for Young Thug is Jeffrey. I remember when I first heard Jeffrey, and I thought to myself, this is the one that's convincing me that I actually do now enjoy Young Thug. Because before that, I was a bit shaky. I could never really get into what he was doing. I always found his voice a bit too much. His delivery is incredibly unique and specific to himself, but I think it also is a bit of an acquired taste. But wait a minute, this mixtape's a bit wacky and a bit weird, and I kind of enjoy what he's doing here, and the songs are actually really good. And that was the turning point for me, and I think it was for quite a few people too. I think up until this point, people weren't really sure what to think of him, except for his core fan base. But then I think Jeffrey was a bit of a sea change, honestly, and people started going back to his other stuff and realised that, yeah, this guy is really, really good. He's so random, he's so off the cuff, he's just so off the fucking chain at times, and I think that is exactly what people love about him so much. It's essentially a mixtape that just highlights his best qualities, and it's totally understandable as to why people think it's his best mixtape ever, but I do think he does have a few of the better ones, but we'll get to those later. At number 18, we have Cakes to Killa, one of the most underrated rappers of the 2010s, and I will stand by that, because every time this guy gets on a feature, he kills it. This mixtape is absolute killer from front to back. If you're telling me you're looking for some big bangers from start to finish, and you have never put your ears onto this, you are doing yourself a disservice. It is just fire from beginning to end. Cakes' rapping is just so speedy, and again, anytime you hear this guy on a feature, he is just there to steal the show because he has just so much personality coming through with his voice, so much charisma. He snatches your attention instantaneously. He's so much fun, doesn't take himself too seriously. And it's a shame that whenever mixtapes get brought up, I think the Eulogies ended up falling by the wayside a little bit. I guess it is a bit older. It's from 2013, one of the older ones from this entire list, I'd say. But still, man, you should not be forgetting this. And I didn't want to forget it, and I want to remind people of how good it is by bringing it up in this list. And it is so deserving of its spot.
So if you haven't been living under a rock for the last 10 years, you probably know who Death Grips are. And for a band who shroud themselves in so much controversy, they've remained fairly anonymous to this date, doing a lack of interviews and general public appearances. But in the early 2010s, they were even further into that anonymous sense of personality, even as far as having only one member credit at the time of their conception, being former Hella drummer Zach Hill. In the early 2010s, there was a self-titled EP which has some new material, but also early version of a song that would appear on their debut mixtape, Exmilitary. Exmilitary released a month after the EP, pretty much exploding onto the music scene, and it's not really hard to see why. It's almost a decade old at this point, and still feels ahead of its time and still fresh in the mind to this day, with their approach to production in the hip-hop genre, as well as remaining as a key aspect of their discography, which some debuts failed to maintain as artists release more material. Opening track Beware is a really great example of an opener that sort of like encapsulates the band's overall sound of the mixtape and creates an unnerving atmosphere that evolves at an unpredictable rate throughout its duration. The opening samples an interview from Charles Manson before erupting to a mix of blaring horns and overdriven guitars originally sampled from Jane's Addictions of the Beach. And I think it's a really shining aspect about the album, and just Death Grips in general. They've always had a very distinctive approach to their use of sampling, with this project in particular probably being the most traditional approach to the art. The band's punk aesthetic isn't really hard to miss, especially with Rye's vocal presence, but it's further elevated on a track like Clink, as the guitar riffs on Black Flag's rise above, blended with Zach Hill's caustic drumming and Rye screaming at the top of his lungs during the intro. Some other notable songs from the EP from the mixtape include fan favorite Guillotine, which is myself and many others probably found out about Death Grips through this track, with its soaring synths and Rye's classic vocal performance before building up to like these aggressive sirens at the end of the track. I mean, it's not hard to see what that's pretty iconic to this day. Tachyon has very initial sparse production, which is fairly jarring, but it's balanced out with Zach's primal drumming and arguably Rye's most raw and aggressive performance to date. What I always think is the most overlooked track known for it has this nostalgic yet ominous instrumental with Rye's hazy flow matching it perfectly. Really fucking great tune. And Culture Shock, in which Rye swaps his traditional like signature very aggressive vocal style with a more subdued performance, which brings me to an often overlooked part of Death Grips' discography in general. What attracts most newcomers to Death Grips has always been MC Rye's vocal style, which I think often overshadows their lyrical content, and there's quite a lot to go into and unpack when reading Rye's lyrics. I already mentioned Culture Shock earlier on in the video, but in this song Rye goes into the follow the leader ideology of how people jump onto new trends and fads as media and culture progresses and evolves. Rye says in the song, "You speak in abbreviations because real life conversation moves too slow. You're the media's creation, yeah, your free will has been taken and you don't know." The mixtape is still fairly rough around the edges, but that doesn't mean it's not a pivotal project in the band's career, as well as not tarnishing the band's legacy and album, not only upon its release, but almost 10 years later, acting as a great start of the band's career.
At number 16, we got Vicki Leekx, who also goes by the name of M.I.A. You know M.I.A, and you should know Vicki Leekx. Another kind of underrated, maybe even obscure listen here, but I think the fact that it is under a different name kind of hindered its popularity, and the access to this thing is a bit difficult too. Similarly to Cakes to Killa, actually. Both these mixtapes are really difficult to kind of get a hold of now for some reason, because they were pretty accessible at the time, but I guess if you go onto some random obscure website, you may be able to pick up a download or something. But Diplo is all over this mixtape, and the sampling is insane. M.I.A. pulling out some of her best performances ever, honestly. I do think this trumps some of her albums, and it's weird because, again, I think if she put it under her own name, I think many people would have heard it, many people would have fell in love with it, and many people would agree with me that it actually does end up trumping some of her actual core studio album material. And this is what I love about mixtapes, the creativity of it all, because I guess she just kind of went, look, it's a mixtape, I'm just going to try something different. And Jesus Christ, she does. she friggin' does. And you would never have heard this on a studio album, because I assume the sampling and everything like that would have been too difficult to get accepted and get, you know, all the royalties and all that kind of shit. But it ends up being her most like energetic release. Each track just keeps popping off, man, and the production is insane. Like, this is what I love about mixtapes. It's stuff like this. On the complete opposite end of the scale, we've got Conway at number 15 with Everybody Is Food. I've always said Conway is my favourite of the bunch in the Griselda. I feel like I'm a broken record with constantly repeating that, but I may as well say it again. Conway is my favourite of Griselda. And this mixtape essentially is the reason why. It's just so cold-blooded and absolutely gory and just so chilling at points, the way Conway raps and the way he describes things, and it just kind of reminds me of listening to some kind of like horror film or some kind of like thriller type film, some kind of crime film. It kind of instantly gets you into that mindset. It's only about 30 minutes long, and it just takes you straight back to like the golden era of like hip hop gangster rap in the 90s, that kind of New York type stuff. And I'm here for it, man. I think Conway absolutely kills the sound. And every now and then when you want something really dark and fucking brooding and you just want to listen to this. And luckily he ended up proving that he had a bit of versatility later on in his career, just 2 years later with his 2020 album, which I've loved as well, which came out in September. And this was really just the starting point of where he was back then. But I still think it holds up, even if he has topped this release since. It doesn't make this any worse to me. I still think it is a great release. And once again, another highlight in the Griselda camp. At number 14 though, we have Lil B. If there's anyone more fitting for the mixtape era, it is Lil B. There's no one beating Lil B. At first, this guy was not taken seriously at all. He was clowned to death. He was taken completely not seriously, if that even makes sense. He was on the opposite end. This guy was not a thing to people. He was just a laughing stock. And yet, I have no shame putting this on the list, because for as long as this album is, the consistency is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. How the hell are so many songs on this thing so damn good, and yet there's like 30 songs? And I'll tell you why. It's the magic of Lil B. Magic of this man. He is like no other. The way he raps is just so unique. His rhymes are pretty just terrible, honestly. His rapping is not anywhere near the level of some of the greatest of all time. Don't get me wrong, he's not on that level at all. But my God, I love the way he just doesn't care. He is like just the epitome of someone who is just more passionate about something than they actually are incredibly talented. And it shines through, I think. It shines through that he's not amazing. But I think he knows that as well. And he can still put out a friggin' damn banger. I Own Swag is so damn hard. And man, that song blows my head off every time I hear it. God damn. I think slowly, people have come around on this as well. It's not like I'm the first person to say that this is a good mixtape or even a great one, because I think people have slowly come around on Lil B. And even just this style, this brand of hip-hop in general, the lack of lyrics became the in thing. Everything that's charting, everything that's mainstream in rap now is like this. It's not lyrical. It's kind of hazy and a bit weird, and the rapper doesn't exactly have anything to offer in terms of themes or anything like that. I'm not going to say he was the starting point of that, but I definitely think he ushered it along. He made it cool. He made it normal to not be a lyrical rapper, because that's what it is like nowadays. That's the thing these days. No one in the mainstream in rap can really rap that well, but they're still incredibly successful, and they still put out bangers, and they still put out fun songs. And that's kind of what Lil B was doing all along. At number 13, I think perhaps the most squandered potential of any rap group ever. was on this mixtape, and that is Flatbush Zombies with Better Off Dead, because they started so high. The bar was so high that it was really difficult for them to really reach it with subsequent releases, and they just never did. I just don't really believe they ever did. They could just never replicate songs like GT or tracks like Bliss, for example, which are so damn hard. But yeah, like this mixtape really highlighted the qualities of each member, the kind of production that they were rapping over. They were really fresh, honestly. I remember hearing them early on because I started to get into hip hop music in about 2014. So I got onto this mixtape around then. So I was like, man, this group could go places because of how good this was. But I just don't think they ever did, and I think many people would agree that they really didn't live up to this. And that's another thing with the mixtape era as well. You do have groups or artists like this that drop something so good in this time that they just were struggling to really replicate their success. I'm so glad they dropped this, honestly, because it truly is a highlight in hip-hop for the 2010s, I think. It truly is a highlight for the year it came out too. But it's just a huge shame that I just don't think anything ever really topped it. But so what? It's so good for what it is. I can replay this over and over again for years to come. And even if they never drop anything on this level again, it doesn't change the fact that whatever they did here is so bloody good. It might be a flash in the pan, but Jesus Christ, what a good mixtape it is. Now we have the collaboration between Gucci Mane and Chief Keef, which has ended up being my favorite of either artist's discography. Not to say I've heard everything that both artists put out, by the way. I should point that out. I have been meaning to try both artists a bit more in depth. I've heard many things that they've dropped though, but for now, maybe this will change in the future. But the absolutely dark nature of this is quite apparent across every track. I really like their flows across this mixtape, although apparently Chief Keef does repeat many lines that he's said in the past over this mixtape, but you know what? I'm not going to be here and say I go to Chief Keef for lyrics, especially when you read some of the bars on this. I ain't advocating for anything they say on this because this is incredibly violent and bone-chilling, but there's some weird appeals to this that I can't quite shake away. I think the hooks on this are really good as well. I find myself just rapping along to the hooks every now and then. They get stuck in my head pretty easily. I think both members bring something really unique to the table, and both worlds collide really well, and they just sound great. Like, I don't know what it is about this mixtape for me, but I don't know why I've become drawn to it. I don't get it, but it just has locked me in. Whenever it comes on, I just really enjoy it. So yeah, even with a few blind spots here and there, not so much with Chief Keef, I've heard a lot of his stuff at this point, but more so with Gucci. I'm still pretty content with this on the list. I enjoy Chief Keef's stuff. Back from the Dead and Back from the Dead 2 deserve shout outs here, by the way. They deserve their placings on this mixtape list. But I'm going to go with this one because I think I'm just drawn to it more. I enjoy this more. So that's that.
What's going on, people? Mike C Town here. So I'm talking about the Weeknd's House of Balloons. I can't remember if this album was the first Weeknd project that I'd listened to, but it may have been. But this is after one of the Dead and Hip Hop guys, F.O.O.D, actually put me on to him, saying that he thought I would actually really like his music. And right into the first song, High for This, I was floored. This was unlike anything I'd heard before. The buzzed out bass, the dreamy vocals, the debaucherous content. It was glorious. Songs like the title track, House of Balloons / Glass Table Girls, it has such an interesting vibe. It's upbeat and it's almost dancey while still having this dark and melancholic aspect to it, you know? Then you have a song like Wicked Games, the story of him telling all of his pains and secrets to a sex worker, just trying to have a moment away from his regular life. You know, it may seem like a foreign concept for most people, but I also think that it's something that a lot of us can actually relate to. Bring your love, baby, I could bring my shame. Bring your drugs, baby, I could bring my pain. I got my heart right here. I got my scars right here. It's really a beautiful song, and the way he lays it out, it's like a scene from a movie. I think this album really came out of nowhere, and it really just fucked the game up, you know? The odd and unconventional sample choices in the production on top of the weird like hisses and noises and shit. Abel's silky voice that just floats effortlessly over the music. And the brilliant thing about this album is it just feels so honest. For people who are or were involved in the lifestyle of random drugs and even more random women, it feels authentic, you know? It's not overly heady or needlessly poetic. You know, we don't need a whole bunch of pretentious metaphors for songs about getting high and having sex and then feeling unsatiated and depressed afterwards. You know, Abel cuts straight to the point, and I think that's what connects for a lot of people. Even if you're not a part of that lifestyle, the music and the content makes you really feel what it's like to live vicariously through it, and that's why I love this album. But just the fact that this album introduced the world to The Weeknd and his unique style of R&B puts this easily into the classic category.
We have more Thugger at number 10 with Beautiful Thugger Girls by Young Thug. This man got wrote off too quickly, and it's another example of how people kind of change their opinions over time, because I feel like with time passing, people would appreciate this Thugger project a lot more than they did when it first came out. Including myself, by the way. I don't know what it was I didn't like about it, but tracks like Family Don't Matter are amazing to me. And the instrumentals, trying to incorporate more like acoustic guitar and stuff like that, could come across corny, but I think it actually ended up working. And this might be one of the best examples in Thugger's entire discography of showing how he can incorporate versatility in his work and how it pays off, because I think it truly does pay off really well. Even without that, it's just Thugger doing what Thugger does best for an entire project, so I find it hard to believe why anyone would think this was bottom tier for his discography, because I think it's really up there with his best.
Let me tell you guys about this album, or better yet, mixtape. Thank you, Ryan, for having me a part of this video, you sexy little bitty bitch. Let me tell y'all about this delectable mixtape. It's called Trap Ketchum, bro. This tape is a Pokemon-themed trap album. It is fucking brilliant. So this record is by a YouTuber named Shofu, and basically he got a bunch of nerdy online YouTube Pokemon rappers together to create the greatest thing of all time. This is a record that I gotta thank my boy Lamar for putting me on. He was telling me about it for a minute, like, yo, this album's actually like legit fucking flames. And I was like, you know what? I can see that. Like, I can imagine just the spirit, the energy, the feeling of listening to this thing, just that kind of youthful, just like, who gives a shit? It's a Pokemon trap album. I can just imagine it being so contagious and exciting. For 16 fucking tracks, this record is a blast. The instrumentals all featuring samples from video games and Pokemon. You turn them into just like these really hard, catchy, accessible trap beats, and all of these rappers, they are pretty fucking capable MCs. Like, you could definitely very easily find this mixtape to be pretty cringy, I guess, because it's like, it's all about Pokemon. They're referencing like Mewtwo and Bulbasaur. Ride on, like, there's a line where he's like, I'll give your girl something to ride on, like characters like Ash and Misty and all that shit, and they turn them into like these braggadocious hip-hop reference points, which you could very easily see as cringe. You might think it's like on some Dan Bull type of shit, but I don't fucking care. Okay, this record is a blast, dude. Like, the rapping is actually so, like, contagiously confident. The beats are legitimately excellent, especially in the second half. Quite soulful at points, especially on a track with 6 seconds. Payday. I don't understand. The bounce on that track is monumental. It has this really sick 8-bit little sample that's so fucking catchy. The hook is addictive as fuck. The track Alpha and Omega is actually like one of the most devilishly cold-blooded fucking rap songs I can think of off the top of my head. That's on a Pokemon Some of these features are amazing too. Token Black, Anonymous is on the record. Matt Houston's verse on the track, I think it's Final Battle. fucking brilliant. Peso Pete has some really good verses too. The features, they're all so committed to this Pokemon theme. It's so delightfully, like, communicatively nerdy. I fucking love it. It clearly took an immense amount of collective minds all wanting to be as on the ball. Like, everyone had to be there 100% on board with the vision. And this record definitely speaks to that. Like, everyone here is just like is having so much fun with it. Yeah, I love this fucking thing. I think it's wonderful. I'm really glad Ryan likes it too, bro. That's fucking dope. I'm glad he got me to do the segment, you know. I'm proud. I'm very proud. Go listen to it, man. Go listen to it. It's fun. It's tons of fun, especially if you're a fan of Pokemon. But even if you're not, like, it's still really enjoyable. Just like a super overly extravagantly hype as fuck trap record, it totally suffices in that regard. But yeah, if you're a Pokemon fan, you're going to be hearing things like, you're going to be catching so many sick punchlines. Thank you for watching my segment. On with the video, Ryan. Go get him, buddy.
One of the more iconic albums, mixtapes of the trap genre, Barter 6, Young Thug. Definitely up there with one of my favourite trap releases ever. And I don't really know if there's any more explanation than that. It's pretty obvious as to why. Even the features from Birdman don't drag this down entirely, although they definitely are the worst moments on this whole thing. This mixtape really is just the epitome of that era, honestly. It really catapulted a lot of trap artists to the mainstream. A lot of artists started taking from this, and I don't think people at the time realised the influence of what Barter 6 really had. Coming out at the same time, around the same time anyway, as Rodeo by Travis Scott, I think a lot of people just focus their minds onto that more so than this, even though, yes, maybe Rodeo had more of an influence, but I think taking the influence away from Young Thug is truly foolish, because I think this mixtape did more for trap than people realize.
I personally find it really hard to describe what is so amazing about this tape in only about a minute, because in my opinion this thing deserves an hour-long video essay going completely in depth about the lyrics, the beats, and the overall themes of the project. But either way, maybe I'll do that someday. But just for a short summarization of why this album is amazing, the production on this project is so hazy and hypnotic and psychedelic, and it just lures you into the drugged out atmosphere of this project. And then on top of these beats, Lucki with his really pained and weathered delivery is just talking about his addiction to drugs, specifically Molly and lean, also talking about a lot of heartbreak that he's had with women, and just overall mental demons that he's dealing with. You know, to put it simply, I would almost say that this kind of combines the lyrical abilities of Earl Sweatshirt with the simplicity and hypnotic trap songwriting abilities of a Playboi Carti. Lucki's flows on this project are often extremely unique. Also, the way he'll manipulate his voice on songs like Thank God just adds so much to the emotion that you'll feel from some of these songs. But the thing is, even if you don't want to fully read into this project lyrically and what Lucki is talking about, it's honestly just a fun, experimental cloud rap listen anyways, and I personally think it sounds extremely unique and it stands out from its contemporaries very well.
At number 6, we have a mixtape that kicked off the career of one of my favourite hip-hop groups of all time, to be honest. That is Injury Reserve with Live from the Dentist Office. They came through with one of the most creative and unique sounds of hip-hop for its time, I think. I'm sure they wear their influences on this mixtape a little bit more than their following releases, but man, no one was doing it like them. And even now, I don't think anyone is doing it quite like this. Who has the production like Parker Corey on tracks like Yo, Everybody Knows, Washed Up, TTK-TV. Man, these tracks are just absolutely stellar. Then you've got the rapping from Richie with the T, then you got the rapping from Groggs. They come together so bloody well, because you've got Groggs who's a bit more serious, a bit more on the emotional side of things. You've got Richie who's a bit more silly, a bit fun, you know what I mean? He's more tongue-in-cheek. Just, they come together so well, and my God, the bloody replay value of this entire thing is so good. The one-liners that they drop throughout, god damn, I just love Injury Reserve, man. I really fucking love them. I truly urge anyone to listen to this if they haven't already, man. God damn, it's so good. So good. What a starting point as well for a hip-hop career, because if you're dropping something of this level so early on, there's only high places to go, right? You're only going up from there.
Friendzone's Collections 1 one of my personal favorite mixtapes of the decade. So thank you to Ryan for asking me to do this. I've been wanting to be in a Ryan video for a long time. Friendzone's Collection 1. What can I say about it? Well, it's classed as an instrumental hip-hop record, and there's some cloud rap vibes to but I think it goes deeper than that. I think it's rooted very deeply in a lot of house music. You'll hear that in just the way it bounces along. You'll catch on to it immediately. It's quite difficult to sort of to picture in words, but yeah, I think it goes more than that. I think it's kind of vaporwavy too. A lot of the samples are like slowed down, mixed weirdly. That goes for the entire record too. This record's like mixed very strangely throughout. A lot of the instrumentals are very deep in the background, but I would say that the snares and the hi-hats, some of the drums, all very pronounced, and so you get this weird separation between the two. It creates like a very odd relationship that kind of makes me think of if Oneohtrix Point Never had beats. The track Nia, which is quite early on in the album, I think shows that quite well. And just generally, it's very tribal. I think it's got a lot of tribal ambient influences too. That's the whole vibe. It's difficult to explain. It's a very offbeat project, but overall, one of the most interesting experimental instrumental hip-hop albums that you'll ever hear. So thanks again, Ryan. I hope you check this out.
Nostalgia Ultra at number 4. We have Frank Ocean here. I already expressed how much I like this already in previous videos. In my decade list, in fact, this was incredibly high there. And yeah, I think it might even be my favorite Frank Ocean. Might be my favorite Frank Ocean album. I think it might be the best one. I think so, guys. I think it's the best one. Sure, is it like Blonde? Is it like Channel Orange? No. But I love this thing, man. I love this thing. And I don't know why I think it's my favorite, but there's just something so damn good about how this mixtape flows. It's a mixtape, but it flows incredibly well. And yeah, sure, some of the tracks are covers, but you can't really say American Wedding is a cover because it ain't anything like Hotel California by the Eagles. Like, they're not the same at all. I mean, technically they're the same instrumental, but Frank Ocean's critiques of, marriage and the way people get into marriage, then to get divorced, all that kind of stuff. The lyrics are really on point and poignant, and even without that, the tracks themselves are just really easygoing. Like, it's such an easygoing listen, and sure, many of the songs aren't exactly what you've never heard before, but I don't really think they need to be, because Frank has a good voice to carry the tracks. The choruses, the hooks are really strong. Tracks like Swim Good, for example, are stellar. Novocaine, stellar. It's not his most ambitious or creative release, but it doesn't need to be. I just don't really have the urge to go back to his other ones like I do this one. Channel Orange comes close, but even still, I think I like this one just a little bit more, and that's my unique opinion of the day. Something you may not be familiar with hearing, but Nostalgia Ultra, man, I fucking love it.
The whole crew's here. Hello, I'm Liam. I'm going to be talking about Noname's Telefone, a mixtape that is definitely one of my favourites, so I'm glad I get the time to talk about it. And the fact that it was pushed back a few years, and you think of like movies and games where they get pushed back and end up just feeling really super dated. Telefone just didn't feel that way at all. I think it just made it kind of brew, blossom, age, just like a fine wine. And I just always love with Noname's music how homemade it feels. It feels like your gran and papa's like homemade, whatever their special is, spaghetti bolognese, pasta, whatever, just makes your heart feel just so warm and so full. And I need to give a specific shout out to the closing track, Shadow Man. Every song on here I think is good to great, but Shadow Man is like one of the best closing tracks of the 2010s. Noname just talking about her like imaginary funeral, which is something that it seems to be that she talks about with her kind of community. That's something they have to face, their own mortality. And then you've got Smino's verse, which is just wonderful. The tippy toe and a tightrope line just always just makes me kind of go, yes, we're about to get like one of like the strongest verses of the 2010s as well. Lots of different bits of this mixtape can easily be followed by X, the best X of the 2010s, the best Y of the 2010s. Telefone was just such a rewarding listen when I listened to it back in 2016. And even now, 4 years later, we've even had Room 25. That talent hasn't faded away at all. What Noname's contributed, not just to the music scene, but also just kind of culturally to her community at large, is just super nice to see. Easy to get bogged down and sad about the state of things, but there's always something worth kind of looking at in a positive light. And Telefone and Noname as a whole keeps me very optimistic, so glad I got a chance to talk about it. On to the next one, unless I was the last one, which makes this kind of awkward.
At number 2, one of the most 180'd artists I think I've come across in recent years. The interesting progression of people thinking this guy was awful, horrendous, one of the worst artists in hip-hop, to then thinking this guy's one of the best, and put out 2 releases that people absolutely adore. I find to be hilarious. You may have worked it out, but it is Playboi Carti at number 2, and my video on this album, this mixtape, aged like shit. It truly did age like absolute dog shit, because I hated it to begin with, and now it's at number 2 on a mixtape list. That doesn't even make sense. And what's funny is that so many people hated this guy and did completely change their opinion. But goddamn, this mixtape's so good. When you just kind of take yourself away from thinking that lyrics have to be everything, and lyrics in hip-hop have to be amazing, you do truly come to realize that Playboi Carti is actually one of the best out there, because he just knows how to formulate a hook out of nothing. He could just go, yeah, what, and that's a hook, and it works, and it's great. Location, absolutely atmospheric wonderfulness. You're like floating on a cloud listening to that song. I don't know how the producers came up with that beat, but holy shit. Wow. Magnolia, of course, being the big single from it. New Chopper, though, might be one of the best tracks here with A$AP Rocky. I feel like he comes through really well on features, and this is a good example of that. But yeah, just banger after banger, man. The beats on this are stellar. Playboi Carti's doing his thing that no one else can really replicate. I'm surprised more people haven't tried copying him though, but if they did, I think it would be too obvious and people would instantly shoot it down and be like, nah, they ain't doing it like this guy, because no one really can do it like Playboi Carti. With all that being said though, we do need to crown a winner, crown a number 1. What is my favourite mixtape of the 2010s? And I think some of you already know. I've already mentioned this group in this video already, but they needed to be mentioned again because one of my favourite albums, period, of the 2010s, it did really land very high on that list, is Injury Reserve's Floss. Truly, and I stand by this, truly a game changer in hip-hop for me. I don't think anyone can really come close to what they did on this mixtape. The run, the like 5-track run at the start, it may, you know, I think to extend that to 6-track run is unbeatable. Like that alone is just unreachable. Like that alone, if that was an EP, that would probably be mixtape of the decade. Like seriously, it would still be the mixtape of the decade if it was just those tracks. But yeah, it's not, because they still deliver some really great tracks in the second half of the mixtape too. The more emotional type stuff that we always get on their projects, where they go into more of their mental health, and they go into more of their feelings, their emotions, how things are going on in their life. Keep on Slipping, you've got Look Mama I Did It, some of their best tracks. Even a Vic Mensa feature doesn't hold back Keep on Slipping, even with that Jamaican Me Crazy lyric, which is terrible. It doesn't ruin the song too badly, which is pretty impressive. But goddamn, the first half, Oh Shit, All This Money, Girl with a Gold Wrist, fucking What's Goody with the Cakes to Killa feature, another one of those features I was saying that he's so good at. Like, Jesus Christ, the hard bangers that has production like no other. No one is producing tracks like Oh Shit, and if they are, point me in the direction. Who is doing songs like this? You need to tell me in the comments, because I need to find them. No one has the production like Parker Corey, man. All This Money, fucking hell. Tracks like Eeny Meeny Miny Mo, Jesus Christ. The way these rappers come through, Groggs and Richie, just impresses me all the time. They're not the most amazing lyrical rappers out there, but I think they used what they've got to their advantage. Richie uses his personality, his funny off-the-cuff jokes, his one-liners, some really funny lines in S on Your Chest, which again, another stellar song. Groggs bringing out more personal type stuff. They just have a great combination, and everyone comes together so well. I just love this thing. I absolutely love this thing, and I don't want to fool people as well into thinking, oh, he put this at number one because of course Groggs did pass away early this year, but that didn't affect it, honestly. This was already my mixtape of the decade. Nothing changed that, and of course, rest in power to Groggs. Really devastated by that. I still think about it quite regularly because they do mean so much to me in terms of their music, and of course this being number one is really kind of tragic because we don't know what's next for Injury Reserve. That might be where it ends. It might end at their self-titled album that came out last year, which was also fantastic in my opinion. That could be it. We don't know now. And you know, he was young, he was a father with children. It's awful, really. It truly is. I'm sure it would mean a lot to, you know, his family and the other members of Injury Reserve to know that this had an impact on many people, including myself, because of course this is my mixtape of the decade, and really always was. It really always was. I don't think there was anything that would top this. So yeah. Hopefully you agree. I don't think you will agree, but if you do, that would be fantastic. And let me know in the comments what maybe your top 10 are, or maybe if you have a top 20, what your top 20 are. This is my list. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you're not too angry that something got left off. You're not too angry that something was placed higher than another. You're not too angry that something was number one when it shouldn't have been number one. But that's just my opinion. Floss, Injury Reserve, mixtape of the 2010s. Truly for me, and that's it. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you have a good day. Ooh, subscribe if you haven't already. Goodbye, see you later. Hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.